Hi, welcome to the Silent Avenger channel. If you're enjoying the content, please consider giving it a like and sharing your thoughts in the comments. Let's dive into today's story. I'm Butch. I've never done this kind of thing before, posting my life story online, but I feel like I need to get it off my chest. Maybe writing it out will help me make sense of things. A lot's happened, and it's hard to know where to even start, so I'll just dive in. For context, I'm a former soldier turned cop. I've seen my share of violence, loss, and betrayal. Life hasn't been kind, but I thought I was handling it okay until everything spiraled out of control. It all started on a regular Wednesday morning. I was grabbing coffee at this little cafe downtown, the kind of place where the waitress knows your name and has your order ready before you walk in. I was sipping my usual black coffee when it happened, a robbery. 3 guys burst in, guns drawn, screaming for everyone to hit the floor. Instinct kicked in. Even out of uniform, I couldn't just sit there. The guys were sloppy, clearly amateurs. When one of them turned his back, I tackled him. Things got messy after that. Shots fired, screaming. One of the bullets hit an older guy sitting a few tables over. Without thinking, I dragged him behind the counter for cover and held pressure on his wound while exchanging fire with the robbers. By the time backup arrived, 2 of the robbers were down, and the third had surrendered. The old man I'd saved? Turns out he wasn't just some random civilian. He was Victor RHS, a name I'd heard whispered in police briefings for years. Victor was a notorious mob boss, the kind of guy who could make someone disappear with a phone call. After the dust settled, Victor grabbed my hand, his voice calm despite the chaos. "You saved my life, officer," he said, his grip surprisingly firm for a guy who'd just been shot. "I owe you." I didn't know what to say. I just wanted to get out of there, but Victor wouldn't let go. He looked me straight in the eye and said, "I always repay my debts." I didn't think much of it at the time. I was focused on getting statements, filing reports, and trying to shake off the adrenaline. But that moment set off a chain of events I never could have anticipated. Victor wasn't lying when he said he'd repay me. The next day, I found an envelope in my mailbox with a single note inside. "We'll talk soon. Victor." I should have known better. I should have walked away then and there. But curiosity, and maybe a little pride, got the better of me. I wasn't sure what to make of Victor's note. I shoved it in my pocket and tried to move on, but something about it gnawed at me. I couldn't tell if it was a threat or a thank you. Either way, it didn't sit right. For a few days, life went back to normal, or at least what passes for normal when you're a cop trying to leave your past in the military behind. Then one night, as I was leaving the station, a sleek black car rolled up beside me. The driver's window lowered, and a man in a suit stepped out. "Mr. RHS would like to speak with you," he said, his tone polite but firm. I hesitated. Every bone in my body told me to walk away, but the guy's expression made it clear that wasn't an option. So, against my better judgment, I got in the car. Victor was waiting for me in a private lounge at a fancy downtown club. He was seated on a leather couch, a glass of whiskey in hand, looking like he owned the world. The bullet wound in his arm was bandaged, but he seemed unbothered by it. "Officer Butch," he greeted me with a smile. Or should I say, Sergeant? "I looked into your past. Impressive record." I stayed standing, arms crossed. "What do you want?" Victor chuckled. Straight to the point. "I like that." He gestured for me to sit, but I didn't move. "You saved my life. That's not something I take lightly. Like I said, it was instinct. You don't owe me anything." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Maybe. But where I come from, debts are serious business. You saved me, and now I'm going to make sure you're taken care of." He reached into his pocket and slid an envelope across the table. I didn't open it, but I could tell it was full of cash. A lot of it. "I can't take this," I said firmly. Victor didn't look surprised. "I figured you'd say that. So let me put it another way. This isn't a bribe, Sergeant. It's a gesture. A way of saying thank you. No strings attached." I didn't believe him for a second, but I also knew better than to argue with a man like Victor. I left the envelope on the table and walked out. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. The next day, I got called into the chief's office. Nathan, my boss, and Victor's estranged brother, was waiting for me. Nathan and I had always gotten along. He was the one who convinced me to join the force after I came home from the war, saying the job would give me purpose. "You've been making waves, Butch," Nathan said, tossing a file onto his desk. First, you stop an armed robbery, and now Victor RHS is sending you thank you notes? I froze. How do you know about that? Nathan gave me a knowing look. Victor and I don't talk, but I keep tabs on him. It's my job to know these things. I stayed quiet, unsure where this was going. Listen, Nathan continued, leaning forward. I don't know what Victor's up to, but I know how he operates. If he's reaching out to you, it's not out of the goodness of his heart. Be careful. It wasn't just a warning, it was an order. But there was something else in Nathan's eyes. Concern, maybe. Or fear. Either way, it left me unsettled. By the time I got home that night, my head was spinning. I poured myself a drink, trying to calm down, when my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. Hello, Butch, Victor's voice purred through the line. I hope you've reconsidered my offer. I haven't, I said curtly. There was a pause, then a soft chuckle. You're a hard man to impress. That's good. I like a challenge. But don't make the mistake of thinking you can ignore me. We're bound now, you and I. Whether you like it or not. Before I could respond, he hung up. That was when I realized Victor wasn't going to let me go. After Victor's call, sleep didn't come easy. I was stuck in the middle of a game I didn't understand, between two men who saw the world in black and white but stood on opposite sides of the law. The next day at the station, Nathan called me into his office again. This time, the door stayed shut behind me. Victor called you, didn't he? He asked, his tone sharper than usual. I didn't answer right away, but the look on Nathan's face told me he already knew. Yeah, I admitted. He offered me money. I didn't take it. Nathan leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples. Of course he did. Victor's always been like this, pulling people into his orbit, making them feel like they owe him something. Don't let him get his hooks in you, Butch. He'll twist you around until you don't know which way is up. I wanted to ask why Nathan didn't just deal with his brother directly, but something in his expression stopped me. There was history there, old wounds neither of them were willing to talk about. I'm staying out of it, I said. He can call me all he wants, but I'm not playing his game. Nathan didn't look convinced. You're already in it, whether you want to be or not. Just keep your distance, and for God's sake, tell me if he tries anything. I nodded and left his office, but the tension stuck with me the rest of the day. It wasn't just about Victor anymore. It was about Nathan too, and the unspoken war between them. A week passed without any more calls from Victor. I thought maybe he'd moved on, but then came the day that changed everything. I was out on patrol when a call came in about a domestic disturbance. When I got to the scene, a young woman was sitting on the curb, crying. She was striking, long dark hair, delicate features, but it was her eyes that caught my attention. They were full of hurt, but also something else. Defiance. What happened? I asked gently, kneeling beside her. She hesitated, glancing at the house behind her. It's nothing, she mumbled. I'll handle it. Before I could press her, a man stormed out of the house, his face red with anger. Lily, what the hell are you doing out here? Get back inside. I stepped between them, my hand instinctively going to my belt. Is there a problem here? The man glared at me, but his bravado faltered. This is none of your business, officer. It is if someone's in danger, I shot back. Lily shook her head. I'm fine. Really. Just leave it alone. But I couldn't. There was something about her that made me want to protect her, even if she wouldn't ask for it. I ended up filing a report and giving her my card, telling her to call if she needed help. She took it without a word, her hands trembling. Later that night, as I was getting ready to clock out, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text from an unknown number. Thank you, Lily. I didn't know then how much that text would change my life. Or how Lily's connection to Victor would pull me even deeper into a web I couldn't escape. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to Lily than what I saw on that curb. The text she sent was simple enough, but it lingered in my mind longer than it should have. I didn't reply. I figured it was better to keep things professional. A few days later, during a rare quiet shift, my phone buzzed again. It was another text from her. Can we talk? I hesitated before responding. Something about her felt like trouble, but I texted back anyway. About what? Her reply came quick. It's not safe here. Can we meet? Against my better judgment, I agreed. We met at a park just outside of town. She was sitting on a bench, bundled in a coat even though it wasn't cold. As I approached, she looked up, her face pale and drawn. "I didn't know who else to call," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What's going on?" I asked, sitting down beside her. She hesitated, wringing her hands. "It's complicated. The man you saw at the house, he's not my husband. He's someone I was trying to get away from." Her words were careful, but I could hear the fear beneath them. I waited for her to continue. "I've made mistakes," she admitted. "I got involved with the wrong people. And now, I don't know how to get out." Something about the way she said "wrong people" made my stomach twist. "Does this have anything to do with Victor RHS?" I asked. Her head snapped toward me, eyes wide. "How do you know Victor?" I didn't answer right away. "He's crossed paths with me. Let's leave it at that." Lily's expression hardened, and she looked away. "Victor's my father," she said quietly. "I wasn't expecting that." "Your father?" She nodded, her hands gripping the edge of the bench. "I haven't seen him in years. I left that life behind, or at least I thought I did. But you never really get away, do you?" Her words hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. "Does he know you're here?" "No," she said quickly. "And I want to keep it that way." There was a vulnerability in her voice that made me want to believe her, even though I knew better. "What about the guy from the other night?" Her face clouded. "Alex. He's a mistake I've been trying to fix. But he won't leave me alone. He knows too much." Before I could ask what she meant, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it, her expression tightening. "I have to go." "Wait," I said, standing as she did. "If you're in trouble, I can help. But you need to tell me the truth." She looked at me for a long moment, like she was weighing her options. Then she said, "You don't know what you're offering, Butch. Some things you can't fix." And with that, she walked away, leaving me with more questions than answers. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about Lily. About her connection to Victor, about the fear in her eyes when she mentioned Alex. It felt like I was standing on the edge of something big and dangerous, and Lily was the key to it all. But I didn't realize how deep I was in until the next morning when I found another envelope on my doorstep. This one didn't have cash inside. It had a photo. A picture of me and Lily on that bench, talking. There was a note tucked inside, "Stay away from her." No signature, but I didn't need one. The message was loud and clear. And for the first time in a long time, I felt real fear. The photo rattled me more than I wanted to admit. Someone had been watching us. Someone who clearly didn't want me anywhere near Lily. The note wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. But from who? Victor? Alex? Someone else entirely? I shoved the envelope into a drawer, trying to push it out of my mind, but the uneasy feeling stayed with me all day. At work, Nathan noticed. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, leaning against the doorframe of my office. "Something you want to talk about?" I hesitated. I wanted to tell him everything. The photo, Lily, the connection to Victor. But something stopped me. Maybe it was the way he'd warned me about his brother, or the fact that he always seemed to be 2 steps ahead. Either way, I decided to keep quiet. "Just a rough night," I said, forcing a smile. "Nothing I can't handle." Nathan didn't look convinced, but he didn't press. "Well, keep your head on straight. We've got enough problems without adding more to the pile." His words stuck with me. Problems. That's all this felt like lately, one problem after another, all piling up until I couldn't see straight. That night, I was sitting at home, nursing a drink and trying to piece things together, when my phone buzzed. It was Lily. "I need help." My gut told me to ignore it, to let her figure things out on her own. But I couldn't. Despite everything, I felt drawn to her, like I was meant to protect her, even if it meant putting myself at risk. I texted back, "Where are you?" She sent me an address on the outskirts of town. It was late, but I grabbed my jacket and headed out. The place was a rundown motel, the kind of place that didn't ask questions as long as you paid in cash. I found her in one of the rooms, pacing nervously. "Lily," I said, stepping inside. "What's going on?" She turned to face me, her eyes red from crying. "Alex found me. He's been following me. I think he knows I talked to you." I scanned the room. "Where is he now?" "I don't know," she said, her voice shaking. "He left a message on my phone, saying he'd be back tonight. I don't know what to do. I could feel the panic radiating off her, but I forced myself to stay calm. Okay. First, we need to get you out of here. You can't stay in one place if he's tracking you. She hesitated. But where can I go? He'll find me no matter what. Leave that to me, I said. Just grab your things. As she gathered her stuff, I stood by the window, keeping an eye on the parking lot. That's when I saw him, a shadowy figure lurking near the corner of the building. He wasn't moving, just watching. Lily, I said quietly. We've got company. Her face went pale. Alex. I nodded. Stay here. Lock the door behind me. Before she could protest, I stepped outside. The figure turned as I approached, and my heart sank. It was Alex, and he wasn't alone. 2 other men stood behind him, their faces hard and unfriendly. Evening, officer, Alex said, a smirk playing on his lips. You're a long way from your jurisdiction. Funny, I said, my hand resting on the butt of my holstered gun. I was about to say the same to you. Alex's smirk faded. This doesn't concern you. Walk away. I took a step closer. It does when someone's in danger. Leave now, and I won't have to arrest you. One of the men behind him laughed. You hear that? He thinks he can scare us. Alex held up a hand, silencing him. You've got no idea what you're messing with, officer. This isn't your fight. I didn't flinch. Maybe not. But I'm here now. For a moment, I thought he might back down. But then he reached into his jacket, and everything exploded. A flash of metal. A gun. A shot fired. I dove for cover, drawing my own weapon as chaos erupted around me. The other 2 men scattered, but Alex stood his ground, firing wildly. I returned fire, my training taking over, but my heart was pounding harder than it had in years. By the time it was over, Alex was on the ground, clutching his leg where a bullet had grazed him. The other 2 were long gone. I stood over him, breathing hard, my gun still aimed. You're under arrest, I said coldly. Alex just laughed, blood staining his teeth. You think this is over? You've got no idea what's coming. I cuffed him and called for backup, but his words stayed with me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The aftermath of the motel shootout hit me harder than I expected. Alex's words, "You've got no idea what's coming," played on a loop in my head as I drove him to the station. Something about the way he said it chilled me, like he knew exactly how deep the water was and I was just wading in. When we got to the station, Nathan was waiting for us, his face like a thundercloud. He didn't say anything as I marched Alex inside, but I could feel his eyes on me the whole time. Once Alex was processed and locked up, Nathan cornered me in the hallway. "You want to tell me what the hell happened tonight?" he demanded. I told him everything, Lily's call, the motel, the ambush. I left out the part about Victor though. That felt like a line I wasn't ready to cross. Nathan listened, his expression hard. When I finished, he leaned against the wall and rubbed his temples. "Butch, do you have any idea who you're dealing with? Alex isn't some petty criminal. He's tied up in things that go way deeper than you know." "What things?" I asked, my frustration boiling over. "Why don't you just tell me what's going on, Nathan? Because I'm sick of being kept in the dark." Nathan's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might actually open up. But then he shook his head. "You don't want to know. Trust me." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "Nathan, if this has to do with Victor." He cut me off. "Don't say his name." His eyes darted around the hallway, like he was afraid someone might hear. "You don't want to make this worse than it already is." I clenched my fists, every muscle in my body screaming at me to push for answers. But Nathan's warning had an edge to it I couldn't ignore. So I backed down for now. After my shift, I drove home, my mind racing. I'd barely walked through the door when my phone buzzed. It was a message from another unknown number. "You're making enemies, Butch. Be careful." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. This wasn't just about Lily or Alex anymore. Someone was watching me, and they wanted me to know it. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the phone and wondering how I'd gotten myself into this mess. Every instinct I had screamed at me to cut ties with Lily, Victor, and anything else connected to them. But it wasn't that simple anymore. I was in too deep. The next morning, I drove to the station early, hoping to get a jump on the day. As I parked, I noticed someone standing near the entrance, a woman in a black coat, her hands tucked into her pockets. It was Lily. "What are you doing here?" I asked, walking up to her. "You shouldn't be anywhere near the station." She looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy. I didn't know where else to go. "I'm scared, Butch." Her voice cracked, and for a moment, I wanted to tell her everything would be okay. But I couldn't. "Not this time. You shouldn't have come here," I said firmly. "You're only making things worse." She flinched, like I'd slapped her. I don't know what to do. Alex won't stop. And if Victor finds out?" "Victor already knows," I cut in. Her eyes widened in shock, and I nodded. "I got a message last night. Someone's watching me, and I'm pretty sure it's him." Lily's face went pale. "You don't understand. If Victor thinks you're a threat, he won't stop until you're out of the picture." "Let him try," I said, my jaw tightening. "I'm not scared of him." "You should be," she whispered. "You don't know what he's capable of." I wanted to believe I could handle it, that my years in the military and on the force had prepared me for anything. But deep down, I knew she was right. Victor wasn't just another criminal. He was something else entirely. That afternoon, I went to visit Alex in holding. He was sitting on the bench, his leg bandaged and his hands cuffed. When he saw me, he smirked. "Come to gloat?" he asked, leaning back against the wall. "No," I said, pulling up a chair. "I came for answers." Alex laughed, shaking his head. "You don't even know what questions to ask, do you? You're just flailing around in the dark." I clenched my fists, but I forced myself to stay calm. "Why were you after Lily?" "Because she's leverage," Alex said simply. "Victor's got enemies, and she's the perfect way to get to him." I leaned closer. "And who are you working for?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?" Before I could push further, one of the guards interrupted. "Time's up, officer." I stood, glaring down at Alex. "You're not as untouchable as you think." Alex's smirk widened. "Neither are you." I walked out of the holding area, my head spinning. Whoever Alex was working for, they weren't done with Lily, or me. And Victor? He was still out there, waiting. Watching. I wasn't sure what scared me more, the enemies I could see, or the ones lurking in the shadows. The station felt quieter than usual when I walked back to my desk. Maybe it was my imagination, or maybe it was the weight of knowing how deep this all went. Alex had said just enough to confirm what I already suspected. This wasn't just a fight between a mob boss and his enemies. It was bigger, messier, and I was standing right in the middle of it. Nathan was waiting for me when I sat down. "You've been busy," he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "Don't start," I muttered, shuffling the stack of paperwork in front of me. I wasn't in the mood for another lecture. But Nathan wasn't letting it slide. He leaned over my desk, his eyes boring into mine. "I just got word from upstairs. Someone's asking questions about you. The wrong kind of someone." I froze, my pen hovering over the report I was pretending to write. "Who?" Nathan shook his head. "They didn't say. But if I were you, I'd tread carefully. You're drawing attention, Butch, and not the good kind." "Is this about Victor?" I asked. Nathan didn't answer. He just straightened up and walked away, leaving me with more questions than I had time to answer. By the time my shift ended, the sun had dipped below the horizon, and the chill of the evening was setting in. As I stepped into the parking lot, my phone buzzed. Another unknown number. "Come to the old docks. Alone." I stared at the screen, debating whether to ignore it. But something told me this wasn't the kind of message you could just brush off. Against my better judgment, I drove to the docks, the weight of my sidearm a small comfort against the knot forming in my stomach. The place was deserted, the kind of setting that screamed bad idea. Rusted shipping containers loomed in the darkness, their edges catching the faint glow of the moonlight. I parked my car and stepped out, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. "Glad you could make it," a voice called out. I turned to see Victor stepping out from behind a container, his usual calm demeanor intact. He was flanked by two men, both of whom looked like they could snap me in half if given the order. "This is starting to feel like a bad habit," I said, keeping my distance. Victor chuckled. "You make it sound like we're enemies, Butch. I'm here to help." "Funny way of showing it," I shot back. "Sending threats, lurking in the shadows." His smile didn't falter. Sometimes, a little pressure is necessary to make people see things clearly. I crossed my arms. All right, Victor. You've got my attention. What do you want? Victor's expression shifted, his smile fading as he stepped closer. Alex was a loose end. I trust you've tied that up for me. Alex is in custody, I said. And if you think I'm cleaning up your messes, you're mistaken. Victor's eyes narrowed. Alex isn't just my mess, Butch. He's part of something bigger, something that puts both of us in danger. And Lily? I asked, cutting to the chase. What's her role in all of this? Victor's gaze darkened. Lily is my daughter, and I'll do whatever it takes to protect her. Even if that means keeping her away from you. I took a step forward, my frustration boiling over. You're the one putting her in danger. Your enemies, your life. They're the reason she's running scared. Victor didn't flinch. And yet, here you are. Caught in the middle, just like I knew you'd be. For a moment, we stared each other down, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. Then Victor's tone softened, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. You think this is just about Lily or Alex? It's not. There's a storm coming, Butch, and you'd better decide whose side you're on. Before I could respond, he turned and walked away, his men following close behind. I stood there for a long moment, the cold biting at my skin, before finally heading back to my car. Victor was right about one thing. The storm was coming, and I had no idea how to stop it. Victor's warning stayed with me. A storm's coming. It sounded dramatic, but the man wasn't known for exaggeration. If anything, it felt like an understatement. The next morning, Lily showed up at my door. She looked exhausted, like she hadn't slept all night. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and there were faint bruises under her eyes. We need to talk, she said. I stepped aside, letting her in. She stood in the middle of my living room, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold herself together. Victor came to see me last night, I said, cutting to the chase. Lily's head snapped up. What did he say? That I need to choose a side. That there's more to this than I realize. Care to fill in the blanks? Her shoulders slumped, and she sank onto the couch. It's not that simple, Butch. Then make it simple, I said, sitting across from her. Because I'm getting tired of being in the dark. She hesitated, chewing on her bottom lip. Finally she said, Victor's been fighting a war for years, one you can't see. His enemies aren't just criminals or rival families. They're politicians, businessmen, people who control things from the shadows. And Alex? I pressed. He works for someone who wants to see Victor fall, she said. I don't know all the details, but Alex thought he could use me to get to him. That's why I ran. I leaned back, letting her words sink in. It all sounded so big. Bigger than anything I was prepared to deal with. Why didn't you tell me any of this before? I asked. Because I didn't think you'd believe me, she said. And because I didn't want you to get hurt. I couldn't help but laugh bitterly. Too late for that. Lily stood, pacing the room. You don't understand. If Victor thinks you're a liability, he won't hesitate to take you out. And if Alex's people think you're on Victor's side, they'll come for you too. You're stuck in the middle, Butch. Then tell me how to get unstuck, I said, my voice rising. I don't know, she admitted, her voice breaking. I thought I could handle this on my own. But now I see that I can't. She stopped pacing and looked at me, her eyes pleading. I need your help. I didn't have a good answer for her, not then. All I could do was promise to protect her, even if I wasn't sure how. But as soon as she left, I got a call from Nathan. We need to talk, he said, his tone clipped. I met him at a diner near the station, one of those greasy spoon places where no one would bother us. Nathan was already seated in a corner booth when I arrived, a cup of coffee in front of him. You've got yourself in deep, he said as I slid into the seat across from him. Thanks for the update, I said dryly. Nathan ignored me, leaning forward. Victor's playing you. He always plays people. Whatever he's told you, whatever promises he's made, it's all part of his game. What do you want me to do, Nathan? Pretend none of this is happening. No, he said. I want you to back off. Let me handle it. And Lily? I asked. Nathan hesitated, and that was all the answer I needed. She's not just a pawn, Nathan. She's his daughter. And she's in danger. Nathan's jaw tightened. You think I don't know that? You think I don't want to help her? But this isn't your fight, Butch. If you keep pushing, you're going to get yourself killed. I leaned forward, my voice low. I didn't ask for this fight, but I'm in it now. And I'm not walking away. Nathan sighed, running a hand through his hair. Then you'd better be ready for what's coming. Because once Victor decides you're useful, he won't let you go. And if Alex's people think you're a threat, they'll put a bullet in you without a second thought. I didn't have an answer for that, so I just nodded and left. That night, as I sat in my apartment, staring at the photo Victor had sent me days before, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video. When I opened it, my blood ran cold. It was footage of Lily, walking down a street, completely unaware she was being followed. The message attached was simple: stay out of this, or she pays the price. I sat there, my heart pounding. I had no idea who had sent the video, Victor, Alex's people, or someone else entirely. But one thing was clear. The storm Victor warned me about wasn't coming. It was already here. I sat staring at the video for what felt like hours. Lily, walking down the street like nothing was wrong, while someone, no multiple someones, watched her. The message wasn't just a warning, it was a declaration. They wanted me to know they were in control. And they weren't bluffing. I finally forced myself to move, my hand trembling as I grabbed my phone and called Lily. She answered on the second ring. "Butch," she said, her voice soft and uncertain. "What's wrong?" I didn't waste time. "Where are you?" "At my motel," she replied. "What's going on?" "Stay there," I said firmly. "Don't leave. Lock the doors, and don't answer for anyone but me." She started to protest, but I hung up before she could say more. I grabbed my jacket, my gun, and the burner phone I kept for emergencies. The ride to her motel felt like it took hours, even though I was speeding the entire way. When I got there, I found her pacing in her room, her phone clutched in one hand. She looked up as I entered, her eyes filled with fear. "What's going on, Butch?" she asked. I shut the door behind me, bolting it for good measure. "Someone sent me a video of you. They were following you, Lily. They know where you are." Her face went pale, and she sank onto the edge of the bed. "Who?" "Victor." I shook my head. "I don't know. It could be him. It could be Alex's people. Hell, it could be someone else entirely. All I know is that you're not safe here." She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. "I should have left when I had the chance. I should have." "No," I interrupted, sitting beside her. "This isn't your fault. We'll figure it out. But for now, we need to move. This motel isn't secure." "Move where?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't have a good answer. My apartment wasn't safe anymore, not with whoever sent that video watching us. The station was out of the question, too. Nathan would shut it down the second he found out. Finally, I said, "There's a cabin I know about. It's out of the way, off the grid. We can lay low there until we figure out our next move." Lily hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." We left the motel under the cover of darkness. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting a car to follow us, but the roads were empty. By the time we reached the cabin, my nerves were frayed. It was a small rundown place on the edge of the woods, but it was secluded, and that was all that mattered. As we stepped inside, Lily looked around, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. "How do you know about this place?" "It belongs to a buddy of mine," I said. "He's overseas right now, so it's empty." She nodded, but her expression remained guarded. I couldn't blame her. Nothing about this situation inspired trust. After setting up a makeshift alarm system, just in case, I collapsed onto the couch, exhaustion washing over me. Lily sat in the armchair across from me, her knees pulled to her chest. "What happens now?" she asked. I stared at her, unsure of how to answer. "We wait. See what our next move is." Lily looked down, her voice trembling. "Do you think they'll stop? Whoever sent that video?" "No," I admitted. "But we're not going to make it easy for them." The next few days were a blur of tension and paranoia. I kept my gun within arm's reach at all times, and every sound outside made my pulse spike. Lily didn't talk much, but I could tell she was struggling. Every now and then, I'd catch her staring out the window, her eyes distant and hollow. On the third day, my burner phone buzzed. A single text popped up. "Victor doesn't know she's here. Let's keep it that way." I felt a chill run down my spine. Whoever sent the message was watching us. Maybe not physically, but they knew where we were. And worse, they knew Victor didn't. Lily noticed the change in my expression. "What is it?" I showed her the message, and she went pale. "It's Alex's people," she said. "It has to be. Why would they care if Victor knows you're here?" I asked. She hesitated, biting her lip. "Because they don't just want to hurt him. They want to destroy him. And I'm the key to doing that." Her words hung heavy in the air, a grim reminder of just how deep this all went. If Victor found out where Lily was, it wouldn't just be her life on the line. It would be mine too. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to regret getting involved. Not yet. But I knew one thing for sure: the storm was getting closer, and we were running out of time. The text rattled me more than I cared to admit. If Alex's people knew where we were, it was only a matter of time before something went sideways. Worse, if Victor found out I was hiding Lily, I wasn't sure what he'd do, or how far he'd go to protect her in his own way. That night, I barely slept. I sat at the small dining table with my gun in front of me, the burner phone in one hand and a mug of coffee in the other. Lily was curled up on the couch, a blanket pulled over her. She hadn't said much since I showed her the text, but her silence said enough. Around 3 a.m., the phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. I stared at the screen, the number unknown but all too familiar. My thumb hovered over the answer button before I pressed it and raised the phone to my ear. "Hello, Butch," Victor's voice purred on the other end. I didn't say anything, waiting for him to make the first move. "You've been busy," he continued, his tone almost amused. "Hiding Lily away like that. I didn't know you cared so much." My grip on the phone tightened. "How do you know where we are?" Victor chuckled softly. "You underestimate me. I know everything, Butch. And I know you think you're helping her. But trust me when I say you're only making things worse." "What do you want, Victor?" I asked, my voice low. "What I've always wanted," he said. "To protect my daughter. But the longer she stays with you, the more danger she's in. Alex's people won't stop until they have her, and when they do, they'll use her against me." "Then maybe you should have kept her safe in the first place," I snapped. The line went quiet for a moment, and when Victor spoke again, his tone was icy. "Be careful, Sergeant. You're walking a fine line." I swallowed hard, forcing myself to stay calm. "Lily doesn't trust you. She thinks you'll use her the same way Alex's people will." "Lily doesn't understand the world she's in," Victor said. "But you do. You've seen what men like Alex are capable of. Do you really think you can protect her better than I can?" His question lingered in the air, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. Finally, I said, "I'll protect her from anyone who's a threat. Including you." Victor sighed, like a father disappointed in a stubborn child. "You've made your choice, then. But don't say I didn't warn you." The call ended, leaving me staring at the phone, my heart pounding. The next morning, I told Lily about the call. Her reaction was immediate, panic mixed with anger. "We can't stay here," she said, pacing the small cabin. "If Victor knows where we are, it's only a matter of time before he comes for me." "We're not running," I said firmly. "That's exactly what he wants." "Then what do we do?" she asked, her voice trembling. "We plan," I said. "We figure out what Alex's people want from you and why Victor is so desperate to keep you out of their hands. And then we use that to our advantage." Lily shook her head. "You're talking like this is some kind of game." "It's not, Butch. These people aren't playing." "I know," I said, meeting her gaze. "But that doesn't mean we let them call all the shots." For the first time, I saw a flicker of hope in her eyes. It wasn't much, but it was enough to keep her from falling apart. That afternoon, I drove into town to pick up supplies. I left Lily at the cabin, armed with my backup pistol and strict instructions not to open the door for anyone. As I loaded groceries into my car, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a photo. It was Lily, sitting by the cabin window, the curtains partially drawn. The message attached was simple: "You're out of time." My stomach dropped. Someone was watching her, even while I was gone. I threw the groceries into the car and sped back to the cabin, my heart racing. When I got there, the door was locked, and everything seemed quiet. But as I stepped inside, I saw her standing in the middle of the room, holding a piece of paper. "What's that?" I asked, my voice tense. She handed it to me without a word. The note was short, scrawled in messy handwriting. "Turn her over, or this ends badly for both of you." I crumpled the note in my fist, my jaw tightening. They were here. Lily nodded, her eyes wide with fear. "What do we do now?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "We fight back." Her expression shifted, a mix of surprise and determination. "How?" "I don't know yet," I admitted. "But if they want to play games, they picked the wrong people to mess with." The SUV tore down the deserted road, the sound of gunfire fading into the distance. I slumped against the seat, my heart racing. Nathan didn't say anything for a while, his focus locked on the road. Finally, I broke the silence. "How did you know where to find me?" He glanced at me, his jaw tight. "You think you're the only one watching the players in this game? I've had eyes on the dockyard for weeks. When I saw you show up, I knew you'd need backup. I didn't buy it. You've been tracking me, haven't you?" Nathan's silence told me everything I needed to know. "Who were those guys?" I pressed. "They're not Victor's men," Nathan said, his tone grim. "They work for someone bigger. Someone who wants Victor out of the picture for good." I frowned. "Bigger than Victor?" "You have no idea how deep this goes, Butch," Nathan said. "Victor's not the top of the food chain. He's just a piece on the board. And now you've got yourself caught between all of it." I let that sink in, my head spinning. If Victor wasn't the one pulling the strings, then who was? Nathan pulled the SUV into a secluded lot and killed the engine. He turned to me, his expression deadly serious. "You need to decide whose side you're on, Butch. Victor might be dangerous, but the people coming after him? They won't think twice about taking you out, too." I shook my head. "I'm not on anyone's side, Nathan. I'm just trying to keep Lily safe." "That's not enough anymore," Nathan said. "You're in this now, whether you like it or not." He handed me a small file folder. "Here. This is what I've got on the people we're dealing with. Use it, but don't let it fall into the wrong hands." I took the folder, the weight of it heavy in my lap. "What about Lily?" I asked.